Hmm. Interesting. Hmm. I was watching ads on my own stream to see what it is that's playing. It's kind of fun. Hmm. Okay, we got I think one or two people in. Uh, Hi, Chris. Good to see you. I think you mentioned nitrate on the last stream, so I'll definitely be talking about that. Usually, I do the coverage of things later in the stream. That will be the first thing I go over, because I have some things to say about it, and I didn't use it a whole lot. I used it for I think about 2 hours playing with it, downloading profiles and stuff like that. So I'll let you know what I think. If you're maybe what you can do, if you could, to if you want me to help, define what a film-like image is, and maybe give some examples of movies that you're talking about, so that I can more closely help with that. Because when people talk about a film image, um, that that is such a broad. It's like if someone asks you to paint them a pretty picture, I would go, what do you want? What do you want it to look like? What specifically are you talking about? So when it comes to a film-like image, there's tons of different films out there that all look different, and they can be shot on film but have a particular look that people don't think looks film-like, even though it is shot on film. So maybe just think about how you would define it. Again, give some examples. And it might be that it's not so much a film look that you're going for, a film-like image that you're thinking about, but it's probably an aesthetic that has to do with something outside the color grade. Let's see here. Yeah, definitely be talking about nitrate. It was an interesting experience. Um, I just I don't know if it's for me. That's all. While we wait for some people to come in, please let me know if the sound's okay, if there's any noise or anything weird, any problems with the audio, especially, so I can try to deal with it ahead of time. Um, or name. What's the word I'm thinking of? Audience. I'm also just trying to get some notes written down. I've had a very, very busy week. Usually I have a little bit more time to write out everything that I'm going to do for these things. But man, like, this week has been freaking nuts. I mean, I've barely been able to get into watching this awesome show and putting in the time that I want to see it. And I'm almost done with it, but that's only because there's, I think, 6 episodes per season. But man, this week has been nuts. I was tasked with, since last Friday, cutting 19 lectures. Some were over an hour within like today was the deadline. So it was and I don't work overtime. So it was a mad rush to get it all done. So just a really, really crazy week so far. Uh, Hey, Emotion VFX. Good to see you, man. Let me just make sure that you're the one who sent me email. Yeah, you sent me an email with some really, really cool stuff, man. I can't wait to see that music video. The images look awesome. Yeah, the images look really, really cool. I'm curious about on the email you sent, the second shot, that flare, that interesting orange orby flare. Did you add that, or was that the lens? It looks like that's from the lens. It's a really interesting looking ghosting that you've got going there. It looks really weird, like really, really weird. Like it's like distorted on the top corner, and then it's not a bad thing. I think it looks really interesting. I'm just curious if you added that or not. If you added it, cool. What was the lens, if you don't mind me asking? I don't remember if you told me or not in the email. Let's see here. I guess I'll tell you. Yeah. Takamar. Yep. Okay. Yeah. The 7 element. I had the 8 element. I think there's the later 8 element version of that, if I remember correctly. Yeah, the smoke that you got in those shots is really awesome, dude. So, that's the kind of thing that, a color grade, a LUT, whatever, you're not going to get that. You have to get that on set on the day. And that adds so much depth to the image. And it's one of those kind of tricks that some people don't even know about. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is the one. Yep. Okay. Simple thing to add, just smoke bombs, $5. Yeah. Even just a smoke machine like that we used. We had a crew on our horror movie. We had a crew of people who it was two people with two smoke machines, and we would be like, smokers, the smoke machine guys come out, hurry up, do the smoke machine, and then we would go. And we were doing that outside, and it took a little bit more than I think you guys were doing. I think you said that it lasted quite a bit. Ours lasted, it was like dissipating within, I don't know, a few minutes. So we had to, before, I think it was every other take, if it was for one shot, like go in and have the smokers go back in and do it. So yeah, it was an experience using that, but that can't underestimate the use of like a smoke machine or what you were doing. That atmosphere is what often is missing from, especially like period pieces, making it look like, if you're in a casino in the 1940s or 50s or whatever, and there's no smoke in the shot, it's wrong. Yeah, yeah, that's the kind of thing you need. Especially like you can use smoke with a smoke machine to make things look really dusty, which also adds a lot of atmosphere. Even if it's only a little bit, it adds quite a lot. It's the way that the light catches it. The way the light catches the vapors makes that extra depth. Hard to get that in post. Yeah. All right. So we're in the beginning. Usually this is going to be kind of dense. Hey, Wawi from New Zealand. Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Man, you guys have Weta down there. I remember getting work from Weta, top notch stuff in VFX field, top notch. Yeah, one of those places I want to visit, dude. I want to get to New Zealand at some point. one of my favorite music groups, one of the few groups that I've seen in concert is Flight of the Conchords. I believe they're from New Zealand. If I'm wrong, I will be very upset with myself. Watched the whole show. I've seen them in concert, I think 3 times. And I remember when they came out, HBO, there was an HBO special with them. I was like, yeah. Oh, okay. Wellington. Okay. Wellington. All right, then. Yeah, definitely, dude. Definitely. Wow. And they're from there. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I remember seeing I was in college and I was watching their HBO special and I was laughing till I cried. I could not believe how funny they were. Yeah. Cool, man. Um, all right. So today, and please share thoughts, feelings, whatever in the chat. I'm going to talk about a bunch of things, kind of like off-topic stuff. But the main segments that I'm going to go over today is going to be my impressions of Film Convert Nitro that I looked at. I only spent about an hour and a half to 2 hours working with it, probably more on the 2 hour end, and kind of talk about it. I want to talk about production value and how in reality, it actually, when it comes to either commercial stuff or if it's going to non-commercial, there's a lot of lowered expectations in reality. And one of the things that I think we focus on as content creators, and sometimes just workers within the content, sometimes we get kind of like tunnel vision and we think, okay, my job is to make the production value higher every time. And in reality, a lot of times that's not the case. Sometimes production value is actually detrimental. It depends on what it is, but it's really interesting if you look at certain markets and how certain media is being portrayed now versus how it was maybe 10 years ago, and look at it and ask ourselves, what are we spending our time and money on and why? I kind of want to talk about these other 2 things as a response to some things that I was viewing this week, which was the entrepreneur versus the worker, and this idea of side gigs and full-time business ownership, and how there's nothing wrong with doing either or. So, and there's a lot of times when you listen to entrepreneurial types, they'll tell you that there's kind of something wrong with being a worker, or there's something wrong with having a side gig as your main business, or not your main business, but having a side business and not growing that as a problem, when in reality, there's a lot of reasons why you might not want to do that. And I also want to talk about art, the art field, really, and this race to the bottom mentality. There's a lot of talk about this book, which is really annoying, called Who Moved My Cheese? And I think that people read that and they don't actually ask themselves why any of these things happen. And I'll go over a couple things with that. And the last thing, if I have time, because this is going to be a lot to go over, I have like actually 5 things and usually it's 3, is going to be discovering and targeting underserved markets. And I can go over that next week if needed. But that would be about how, as media producers or workers in the field, we need to really start looking at, and this is all kind of piggybacking on each other, this idea of entrepreneur and worker, art and the race to the bottom, which is happening, and how to look at underserved markets, which is what I do. That's how I work and remain employed. That's what I do consistently, is looking for people who aren't being served and how I can best serve them so that I can remain having an income. So those are all things that we're going to talk about. Hi, DJ. Awesome animation that you posted this week. Really, really cool stuff. So just as a little thing, DJ and I have been working on an augmented reality application that's going to be really cool. I don't know if we're going to be allowed to, how much we're allowed to talk about with it, but it's a pretty cool concept, and kind of one of the things that I really, really want to emphasize to anybody who watches my channel is to keep an eye out for areas to increase your skills, because you're going to have to. Augmented reality, for example, is something that a lot of people don't really know that much about. And the more you know about it, and the more you can leverage your understanding and your knowledge of it and how to create content for it, the sooner you'll have a leg up on everybody else, which is what we end up having to do as workers. Unfortunately, we have to end up doing that kind of thing. You've got to keep your ear to the ground and your eyes open for these new opportunities, because when one thing dies, another thing needs to kind of come in its place. So I don't know how much we can really talk about that application, but it's going to be really cool. I'm excited about it. Never thought that I would have to do augmented reality, like programming and stuff, but it's a new thing. So let's see here. Yeah. So usually at this point in the stream, I also kind of talk about some things that I watched this week. And man, I'm watching this show on Netflix called Kingdom. Dude, gotta watch it. Gotta watch Kingdom. It is awesome. It's I kind of don't want to give away. Let me see here. Yeah, just if you want, okay. If you want, just look up Kingdom. If you want to have like the idea of what it's about spoiled for you, look it up. I'm not going to tell you, because when I started watching it, I had no idea what it was. Okay, I just looked at the image, and I looked at the name of the thing, and I was like, well, looks like something I'd be interested in. And I was kind of just looking for another show to get into, and I watched it. I had no idea what it was going to be about. And that first episode, it throws a lot of really cool storylines at you. Very well shot, very well edited. There's some compositions in it. There's one of them that looks like the raft of the Medusa. And I was just like, wow, what a composition. And it's like this, I can't even tell you what was in the shot because it gives something away, but you'll see it. Like if you've ever seen the art piece and then you watch the show, you'll know what shot I'm talking about. It looks awesome. And there's the really nice thing about the editing in it is that they give everything room to breathe. And that's so uncommon with a lot of stuff out there. Like a lot of narratives end up having like a lot of quick cuts. Some of the fight scenes and some of the lighting, like things get overdone. Like it's almost like there's an overemphasis on getting the perfect lighting. Whereas in Kingdom, everything looks really natural, which I really, really like. So and then the editing, like they give everything some time to kind of like let you soak everything in. And there's a lot of shows and movies that just don't do that anymore. The idea of, and I was talking about this in my community page, someone was kind of bagging on Michael Bay. And the thing is that Michael Bay's audience and the audience for something like Kingdom are totally different. The audience for like a Transformers movie, I call those movies cell phone movies, because, you have the audience, like they're on their cell phones texting, and then a big loud explosion happens, and then they watch all the action. They put their cell phone down, and then plot happens, and then they get back on their cell phone and they're doing things. So it's a different audience. And I think that's what's really nice is that, a movie or a show like Kingdom is doing this whole different approach to narrative, which I really appreciate. So I just like it. So watch it. Totally recommended. I love it. Really good stuff. And they put their money in the right places in that show. You'll see what I'm talking about. So watch it. It's good stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, so Chris Ratchford, I asked you to maybe define what you mean by films. So you're saying you transfer 8mm, Super 8, and 16mm every day. So I'm used to seeing old Kodak film stocks. Okay, so you're talking about trying to match one of the old Kodak film stocks. So that's the thing, is that you're looking at the print, which can be done a number of ways. The thing is that with print, even if it's the same kind of print film stock, depending on who's developing it, it's going to look different. And that's what I think is really important, Chris, for you to understand, is that the film types of looks, anything to do with imaging at all, there's a lot of personal flavors and tastes that go into all that. If you get something done at Photochem, it's going to be different than film done somewhere else, even if you're getting it done using the exact same kind of prints. So it's always going to be someone else's interpretation of something. So the only real aesthetics that I can think of that are pretty common along film is something like how highlights kind of go off into desaturation, which you can do with a Luma saturation curve, which is not that difficult to do. And it's also how colors usually push skin tones toward a certain color, and other colors kind of have just a different way that the hues are represented. So, in a lot of ways, this is all going to be determined on the overall look. If you want it to look like a general, film print from a Kodak print, what is required of you then is to get some of that. If you're digitizing, like I'm assuming that you're taking film and you're digitizing it. And if you're doing that, what you can do is just take some images from that and use DaVinci Resolve to mess about with the hues and the saturation and everything to get them to look similar. And you do this by using the scopes to help guide how it is. That's most of it. And I'm not sure if the film convert really does that for me, but it might do it if you expose and you kind of set your balancing and everything in accordance to what they're expecting you to send in for the film convert to work. I wasn't having very much success with it. If you're one of those, if you're somebody who's actually doing the transfers, if you're transferring to digital, you'll have more of an idea of what the film look this film look that you're talking about looks like than many other people, because you're seeing it every day. So I think that's important to recognize. Like you might have a better idea of it than a lot of other people on exactly what you're trying to get. So the trick is going to be learning how to use the tools that are in the programs that you do have to try to get it to look the same. And you can always create your own lookup table or colorlet, which will do what you're trying to do. So the general Kodak kind of look that you're thinking of is not the same as many other films. There's a lot of films that don't look like that. Like if I'm seeing correctly, the kind of film stock you're talking about, there's a lot of films that just don't look like that are shot on film. Let me just real quick. Let me just real quick find. Let's see here. Yeah, like for instance, if you go back and you watch The Wizard of Oz, a lot of times when people are talking about the film look, are they talking about that movie? Because it's one of the most famous movies ever made, and the color is very saturated. Um, there's a certain way that the colors are done in that are not the same as the Kodak print that you're talking about. There's an emphasis on color for a reason. And that reason was to sell the film stock. So, I think that that's why when someone tells me like they're looking for the film look or whatever, I have to always ask like, what do you mean by that? Because it's always going to look different. And then also sometimes it's a subject matter that's in the shots that determine what that look is, and it has nothing to do with it being a film look. It's just a higher end look. If you're shooting if you're shooting like a movie that has only two color tones in it, and you're actually consciously thinking of that, and you're going to use two color tones in order to emphasize something or to get a feeling, that is going to have this look that you can't really emulate when someone just shoots whatever the hell's in the room. Okay. So that is something to also keep in mind. Like, is the look the way it looks because of the film stock or the film print, or is it the way it looks because of a number of other things that are going on? Like Kingdom, for example, I'm not sure if anybody would say that that looks like film, but I'm one of those people that would say, I don't really care if it looks like film. I think it looks good. So the thing that makes that show a bit more cinematic is the use of environments, the use of set design to really kind of have this engrossing feel, and casting choices, makeup effects, costuming especially, those kinds of things. Whether or not it was on some kind of film print or tried to look like a film print wouldn't really matter to me. So some people, Matthew Scott, don't think motion cadence exists, but I think it does. I think motion cadence also plays into the look. So motion cadence, I've heard that. It is a thing because, for example, rolling shutter versus a global shutter, there is a difference between how they interpret motion. Whether you can see it or not is whatever, but there is a difference. And sometimes with film, like film in particular, the thing is that a lot of film doesn't end up being captured or projected perfectly. So like if you've ever done like a comparison study between, say, a 35 millimeter film and a 35 millimeter camera, and you shoot like, say you're shooting with a Canon C100, right? And then you shoot with I'm talking Super 35, if I wasn't clear, a Super 35 film camera. There's a little bit of motion in the film because when the film's going through the gate, it usually doesn't go through and like is a perfect still image picture taken every single time. Whereas in digital, it's pretty much like boom, flat, there's no real motion in the film. That's an obvious difference between something shot on film and project, especially if it's also then projected on film versus something that's done digital and projected digital. So, I love Wizard of Oz, but also more modern film movies. Plus, I'm red, green colorblind, so it's not the color. Oh, I see. Yeah, so you're seeing it totally different, Chris. You're seeing images. It's interesting that you say that. I was working on a bunch of lectures this week that talked about colorblindness and colors, and how depending on what kind of colorblindness you have, how you see different colors. And I was like, wow, what a thing. Yeah, very. That's interesting. So yeah, I'm really curious to see then how, like, I would need to see, like, for you, like a simulation to understand how you see things, to fully understand what look you're going for then, because that's a totally different thing. Saw Indiana Jones and Last Crusade lately, and no movies now look like that. What do you mean no movies look like that? Specifically in what way? Even exterior shots with just sunlight. Well, it depends, because if you have something like Mad Max Fury Road, which is out in a desert, like a lot of stuff in Last Crusade is shot out in a desert, like the tank scene and all the stuff like that. It's going to have this very brown, gritty kind of look to it. Hey, thanks, man. I'll call you out in a second. I forgot that I added the super chat stuff on there. Thank you, man. Yeah, in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, there's a part of that is also the costuming choices that they have. So it depends. Like you'd have to, in my opinion, Chris, to really do a comparison like that, you have to take like a movie that is shot with similar kinds of subject matter in a similar period to really kind of compare them. Because for Last Crusade, the look makes a lot of sense for the time period that they're going for and the subject matter. So I'd have to see your comparisons. Like that's where I always go like, well, what is the, what are they trying to do with the look? How are they trying to present it? And does it work on its own merits? But yeah, I also like the way the Indiana Jones stuff says. Zeke, thanks for the $2, man. Love your work, Tony. Keep it up. Thank you so much. Thanks for the super chat. If you didn't know, I don't think I ever talked about it, but there's like a little super chat option to help support the channel if you'd like. So whatever you'd like to give, go for it. Thanks so much, Zeke. That's very much appreciated. Emotion VFX. I lately saw Haxan, a film from 1922. Interesting use of color. It's colored. Yeah. The back then they would like go in and color in the film. They had their ways to express something by colors. Good film on witchery. Yeah. I haven't seen that one. What were the ones that I did see? I saw a bunch of them back in the day that were like when I was in film school, where we had to watch like the old black and white films that they were experimenting with trying to add color. And it's really interesting even how they would do it, because like you said, they would use color in very specific ways to try to emphasize certain things in the movie. So yeah, really interesting. So, all right. So we're at half hour in, so I better get to the topics of today or I will never get through them. So let's see here. I'll mention, since as you guys saw, there's a super chat again from Zeke. Thank you so much for that. There's some ways now that I've added some monetization to the channel for people who have been asking, how can I support? There's the super chat, as you see there. And then I'm also working on a little, what's it called? Oh man, I forget what it's called. It's like a membership system for the channel, where there's going to be certain perks you get, like if you subscribe with a certain amount per month. So we'll see how that works out. So I'm working on it. I'm working on the monetization thing and trying to get, people have been asking me with emails, like, how can I support the channel? So those are the things that I'm doing. So once everything's out, I'll let you all know how you can support. First thing, I'll just kind of go down the list again, just for people who are just joining us, what we're going to be talking about today. The first topic is going to be my impressions of Film Convert Nitro in DaVinci Resolve. The second thing is going to be on production value and how lowered expectations on the production value is really the reality now. The third thing is going to be entrepreneur versus worker mentality. This idea that, your side business needs to become a full-time business ownership, and why I don't think that makes sense. It's going to be also talking about art and this race to the bottom mentality that people have, that you kind of have to be aware of. And then how you can discover and target underserved markets when all of this stuff happens. So hopefully we'll be able to get through all that today. It's going to be very tight, but I think we can do it. So cool. So my impressions of Film Convert Nitro. I'll tell you my I guess context to it. Okay. So I really don't like how color grading or any of that stuff is done in Final Cut Pro or in Premiere or in a number of different things. I tried Speed Grade, I didn't like it. I've tried a lot of different programs. DaVinci Resolve is very easy to work with. And this is just my feeling, is that the way that it works makes a lot of sense. It uses a node-based structure that I'm very familiar with. I do not like layer-based systems when it comes to color grading or visual effects at all. And DaVinci Resolve is a very, once you understand it, it becomes very effective as a tool to get the kind of looks that you want. So that's what I'm coming from, okay? I'm not coming from it as somebody who had never used Resolve before, or is coming from like using Premiere, using even the Lumiere or whatever it's called, the newer color grading software in it. It's clunky, it's slow, and it doesn't work as well as Resolve, in my opinion. And I like to do my editing and my color grading in different projects, okay? Even if I'm using Resolve for my edit and for my color grade, I have one project for the edit, and I have one project for the color grade. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I can go over that, at another time, but it's basically a workflow thing. If you are doing your color grading and your editing at the same time, you're wasting your time. Okay, that's all I got to say about that. So with Film Convert Nitro, I didn't understand why I would need it. Okay, the reason is because the out of the box look that I was getting, and I was using some footage that I had from the Pocket 4K, the Pocket 6K, some red footage. What was the other one? The Fuji X-T3. I was using several different cameras, okay? And for each one, I would have to download their camera profiles, which is fine, okay? One time of a download, that I'm not gonna hold that against anybody because it makes sense. Like, I would actually be worried if you didn't have to download a camera profile to make sure that it worked. But that's something that you got to keep in mind. Like, every time that a new camera comes out that you want to use, you're going to have to download the new profile, or you'll have to first wait for them to create the profile. Then you'll have to download the profile. Okay. So the other thing was that the film looks thing wasn't really working for me. I shot on film. Okay, I shot on 16mm film throughout a majority of my time when I was in college. I had to take several classes on it. Luckily, we didn't have to do flatbed editing because that would have been a nightmare. Like, my year that I started, if I remember correctly, it was the year that I started my program, they stopped doing the flatbed editing course, which I would have hated because it would have been very annoying. So when I'm looking at that footage, I kind of remember how it looked. And, I even remember when HD came out in 16mm film, it was like, our 16mm films, even when we were working in HD, it didn't look bad. So I didn't understand why things like, in the Nitro plugin, there's like these film sizes you can pick. And when I was picking like 8mm or 16mm or whatever, it was changing the resolution of the image to look like garbage. I don't get it. I don't get that at all. Again, I shot 16mm film and it never looked like what I saw. Never looked like that. So I don't know why those sizes are there. And so I think somebody was trying to help and said, well, that affects the grain size. Well, I disagree, because I was looking at it and it was affecting the resolution. Maybe the grain size was a part of it, but it was affecting the resolution of the image. And I don't understand why they thought to do that. That kind of thing doesn't work for me. And then even in the film size selections, there's like full frame 35mm. And I'm like, who in film called it that? Nobody. So I don't understand why that was a thing. So like that kind of stuff, like my brain hurts when I think about it. So I don't really get that. The grain default settings are way too strong. Way too strong. Way too strong. There is this Cineon slider thing where it's like the color and the contrast, I think, if I remember correctly, they were mostly unusable. So what I mean by that is, like, you have to imagine if you have a slider that goes from 0 to 100, but the slider is only useful for like maybe 10 to 15% of that range for any practical use, which means that the slider really should start probably, they should change it where it's like, whereas 0 is that end, the lower end of that 15 to 20% of usability. So you have more control. I just didn't understand those sliders at all. I couldn't just take the color away because it would in fact change the contrast. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me why it was designed the way it was designed. So I didn't like that. Changing the contrast in it was another weird thing because it was limiting the scale of contrast in the entire image to a very specific amount. And it was hard for me to expand that. Even if I changed the black and white points, it was still kind of limiting what I could do. And I don't like that. I like having more control over my image than that if I want. So I didn't really like that. Like I always think if I was to use this in a normal sense and I didn't have this kind of control that I do with DaVinci Resolve's normal controls, then why would I even consider using this? The wheels, like the shadow, midtone, and highlight wheels that you can mess with are far worse, in my opinion, compared to DaVinci Resolve's own color wheels. So again, I just don't get that. And then lastly on it, this idea of having it look like film, at least the colors or the way that the contrast is rendered, I could get the same thing like that through Resolve much easier, in my opinion, without having to deal with things like my shadows getting crashed down to where I couldn't really like lift them up in an easy way. Not that it could be that I need more time. I'm going to admit that. Like it could be that I just need more time to get used to it. But I go like, for example, I made a video where I was using Red IPP2 mapping with Fuji X-T3 footage. If I'm able to get a similar look that is out of the box from Film Convert by doing my own way of doing it, and it's easier for me to do it that way, with more control over my shadows, more control over my highlights, and more control over my colors, then why would I use Film Convert? I don't see why I would use it. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, as I think at least moderate user of Resolve, at least, I don't want to go into the whole debating over who's an expert in software, but I think I know enough to be able to get images that look similar. And in fact, I did a test of that and I was able to get similar looking color just by doing a few hue adjustments. So it wasn't really worth it, in my opinion. It just wasn't worth it. So it just wasn't my thing. Like that's my feeling on Film Convert. And if, in my opinion, if you're having a fine time using the Film Convert stuff, I don't see any reason why you should stop using it. If you like it and it works for you, keep using it, man. Like that's your thing. And more power to you that it works for you. For me, the drawbacks to it were too much for it to be really useful for me. So yeah. Let's check the thing here. Nitrate's a little clunky in Resolve. Yes. By a little, I think you mean a lot clunky. Compared to the normal controls you get in Resolve, it felt like going back to like much earlier versions of Resolve, where they didn't quite get everything kind of worked out. That's how it felt. Emotion effects. I use RetroScan Universal 2K to digitize film, mostly home movies, but get some corporate archival work sometimes. Yeah, I used to manage a shop years ago that did analog to digital transfers. And that is very difficult because usually it's the volume problem. You have so much that people want done and they don't want to pay anything for it. And especially if it's stills, you get like bins and bins and bins full of photo albums, and they want you to take out each individual photo, scan it, and then you have to put it back in the photo album where it was, and then they want that on a flash drive. So yeah, I quit that management job in about 2 months, but it wasn't because of the work. It was because the owner was an asshole. Wanted me to run the store illegally, and I wasn't going to do it. I agree. Defaults are too strong. I always lower many of the settings. Yeah, Chris, I think that's one of the main issues I have with it. If the idea is to give me an out of the box kind of look, if that's the intent behind it, then I don't think it's a winner in that. I think there's tons of other like collections you can get that can kind of do a bit. There's I forget who did it, but there's somebody who took, I think it's like 100 or so film emulations that were done through raw therapy. They have like a bunch of film print emulations that are, or it's more like still frame, but they also have film print emulations that are done through raw therapy, which is an open source raw program. And they went and turned them all into 3D LUTs that you could throw in to Resolve. So that the guy who did all that, I think he's only charging like maybe 10 to 15 bucks. If you want to try those, that would probably yield better results, I think, and more options, because you can do a bit more of the contrast control and then just throw the color LUT on the end. But always shot on Super 16 and 35. Awesome experience. We did have to cut the film. That was interesting, especially transitions. So you did have to do flatbed editing? No thanks, dude. No thanks. I remember watching a video on how to do it, and I said, wow, that does not look like it's for me. I'm really like impatient with my own hands. So when I'm doing stuff that's really delicate, I'm an idiot. Like my brain doesn't communicate right with my hands on stuff like that. If it's like throwing a football or playing baseball or something like that, no problem with my hands. If it's like, even putting Legos together, dude, I used to get so frustrated. Any of that kind of like dexterity based stuff with your fingers always really bugs me. Even with my keyboard, I slam stuff with my keyboard. I'm not very delicate with it. Yeah, transitions. Yeah. Chris, I'm a complete beginner with Resolve, so I think Nitrate is a good starting place for me, even to use as a transformation from. Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, if it works for you, go for it. What I do think, though, is keep learning. As long as you are interested in learning, as long as you're interested in learning how to do more with it so that you can get more customized looks, or you can develop your own kind of look or your own film print emulation, keep learning. Because you'll get better, and eventually you'll start to see those limitations, and you'll kind of move away from that stuff. So it's kind of like if you shoot photography. I was a video person for a long time, and when I started learning photography, I said, okay, I'm going to take an hour a day for the next year, at least an hour a day. It doesn't matter if I'm watching TV or listening to it, and I'm like just learning how to set the different settings in my camera. The more you do something, the more of an expert you become at it, and you learn what things are actually going to be useful for you and what things aren't. Like for photography or videography, when is a tripod or a monopod going to be necessary, and when is it not? If you don't study videography enough, you're going to depend on a lot of automatic stuff. And the more you learn, the more you say, hey, I've got to set all this manually, because if I don't do that, the camera is going to do something stupid and ruin my shots. So it's kind of like that with color grading. At first, the auto settings or like these easier kinds of functions might seem really good at the time, and they are, because they help you get the product done, right? You shoot your photos, even if you used auto settings, all that stuff, it's all fine. But as you learn, you start to learn that customizing it and doing more of it yourself, and then developing your own workflows that give you the results that you want every time. And you can kind of like either create a power grade, or you can create your own LUT. It makes it where you still get to put your spin on it. It's your thing, you made it, and it's exactly the way you want it. So just keep that in mind, Chris. And on film, I did not enjoy shooting with film. If you were a film loader, it was miserable. Like loading film sucks. Again, I'm not good with my hands doing stuff like that. So when you're doing film in a dark bag, you can't even see what you're doing, and you have to feed it all. Like you gotta feed it all in right, dude. It sucks. Like it sucks. I did not enjoy shooting film, and then like especially with film back in the day, like you really had to measure everything out. If you wanted to quickly grab a couple shots, you had to, you had to measure it. You had to take it all. If you didn't measure it and all you did was, zoom in with the thing, with the lens, focus, zoom back out because they're all supposed to be parfocal. Well, back then you assume that they're all parfocal and that they're all, all according to the standards that they're supposed to be. And then you find out later that they've drifted a little bit and all your shots are out of focus. It sucks. And then even then, when you're doing your measurements, if the measurements on the lens, especially if you're using old used gear that's sitting in the university stockpile and is not getting recalibrated, you end up not getting sharp shots. Pain it in the butt, film. I'm so glad that we've moved from film, to be honest. I did not enjoy it. Cheap ass reviews. Hey Tony, curious, have you shot many interviews on the BMP CC4K? Do you have a go-to setup? Sigma Art lenses? Yes, Sigma Art. In fact, I just shot this past week. I shot and cut a basically like a welcome back video for somebody who runs a lab at UAB. And my setup is Sigma zooms, 18 to 35 to get all the like the behind the scenes kind of stuff. The 24, like if you have a 24 to 70 kind of thing, basically from like a 35 to 100 for a super 35 field of view is usually going to be fine. 18 to 35 works perfectly fine for me because it's got a really bright aperture. The 18 to 35 1.8 Sigma is shooting this right now. It's on the XH1, or I would show it. And for behind the scenes stuff, I shoot with the naked glass because I want as little flare issues as possible, and then I add flare later. So if you, let me just go find this. Yeah, so this image, that image that I just put in the chat, that's with the 18 to 35 1.8. That's with the Metabone Speed Booster, the 0.71x version. If you're going to use Super 35 or APS-C lenses, do not get the XL, get the 0.71x normal speed booster, the Ultra or whatever. So that's with the Ultra, the 18 to 35 1.8. And that was on a slider on a desk, and it was like a 60p slow motion shot of her using a pipette. So for behind the scenes stuff, 18 to 35, you get that, usually wider field of view, and you can fit it in more places, and it's not very heavy, and it perfectly matches the other Sigma, which it's still attached. The 50 to 100 Sigma Beast. And the two lenses, the 18 to 35 and the 50-100, will cover everything that you'll need. The only caveat would be if you want to get like a 24 to 105 f4 kind of lens, but because it's slower, that's where it kind of doesn't get it for me on the behind the scenes stuff, because I want to shoot with as little noise as possible. So having the option to shoot sharp images at the wide apertures, usually with little flare. Usually the 24 to 105s are fine as far as sharpness, but they tend to have more issues with flare. And also the t-stop decreases usually as you go to 105, which is a problem for me. For example, the Canon 24 to 105 f4L Series 1 has that problem. So it actually, you'll have to change your exposure in post to make shots match. I'm digressing, but yeah, that's my setup. Sigma Art 18 to 35 and the 50 to 100. If you do interviews and stuff like that, that will do basically everything. So, dude, got a piece of work to get done by 2 p.m. New Zealand time. Thanks for the interaction, especially for technical videos or Bible for BMPCC 4K users. My opinion, I'll tune in again. Cheers. Hey man, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Man, it's I guess it's in the afternoon out there. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And I will try to get out to New Zealand when I can. See you next time. While we, I hope I'm saying that right. While we, Metabones 0.7x has 71x has some issues. Is it normal? Some lenses don't snap perfectly over screws. Not sure what you mean. Mine don't. So, you know, with any of those, sometimes the problem is that it's not necessarily the adapter. It might be that the lens mount might be at issue, but I'm not sure. So it might be a case-by-case basis kind of thing. For mine, I have like, let me get to where it's all correct. The actual Metabones here, I always put it with a little, what do they call it? The little brace you can get from Small Rig to keep it from moving. So even the loose ones, which happen sometimes, will not move while it's on here. For as far as over tightening, I'm not sure. I haven't had that issue, and I've had several different Metabones for different cameras, and they've never had that kind of issue. So I'm not sure. My opinion is that the Sigma lenses on the Pocket 4K are great for corporate, but a little too clinical for my taste for narrative, my primary area of interest. Well, I can understand why you think that, and I disagree. I think that with any lens that is clinical, you can more easily achieve the look you're going for in post. But if you're not used to doing that, it might be more difficult for you. The hard thing for me with lenses that are not clinical is that they bake in effects that I usually don't want. So, but I don't shoot narratives as much as I do other work. That's probably why I think that way. It's basically as if the lens isn't tied on. So Emotion VFX, what you might want to do is what mount, first of all, if it's the EF mount, get the locking mount, okay? Because there's a tightening thing on there that will lock it into place, so that kind of thing doesn't happen. And even in a PL mount, like, you know, PL mounts or whatever, like you want to have a way to lock down the lens, because not every single lens is going to be exactly machined to that tolerance, especially if you're using like third-party stuff. So yeah, that should fix your problem. Hopefully it's an EF mount and not like a Nikon F mount, because I'm not sure if they have a locking mount for Nikon F. But if you're having that issue, get that locking mount, and it shouldn't be as much of an issue. I think it's a little bit more for the locking one, but it'll be worth it. Thanks, very helpful. Sweet. I have the 18 to 35, still saving for the 50 to 100. Yeah, for the headshot lens, the reason why I mention a zoom, which is a 50 to 100 1.8, is because you have the ability to do that zooming. If you don't have the ability to do a zoom, you might be in a situation where, like, especially if you're shooting like corporate stuff and you're shooting in an office, sometimes the office has a giant ass table in the middle of the room, and, you know, it might not be prudent to go and get like a hi-hat or set it up on a desk or something like that. So if you're still using your tripod, you can set it up on the other end of the desk. And sometimes also those desks have a bunch of crap all over it, right? So do you want to spend your time getting the shot, or do you want to spend your time cleaning up the mess? Well, you probably want to just get the shot. So you set up, behind the desk, you're able to zoom in. So a lot of people will mention, oh, just get a 50 millimeter prime. You could. There's nothing wrong with that. And that would be the lens I'd go for if it was a prime, because offices tend to be smaller than larger. So, a 50 millimeter makes more sense for that. But if you have the 18 to 35, the 35 could actually do the job in those cases. If you're going to get a prime, the 50 millimeter, for me, it's either like the Zeiss 50 f2 macro for the older ones, or the Milvis 51.4, but it's just as expensive as the Sigma 50 to 100 f1.8. If you get the older lenses like a contact Zeiss or the Zeiss ZE, ZF, even the modern ones, the planars are awful wide open. And for the corporate stuff, you're going to probably want to shoot wide open, and you're going to need it to be sharp on the left and right thirds, because most often the interviews are going to be taking place on the left to the right third. Sometimes in the center, but mostly in the left to the right thirds, because that's usually how masked interviews are done. So the 50 to 100 1.8 throughout the entire zoom range is going to be sharp in that zone. Okay, that's why I think it's great. So yeah, like most f1.4 50s are not as sharp as the 50 to 100 f1.8 Sigma. It's really sharp. So, and the other thing is that it has a neutral rendering, and it matches the 18 to 35 if you already have it. And with the Metabones speed booster kind of stuff, you have a T 1.5 from 18 all the way to 100 in 2 lenses. So pretty cool. Have Metabones CY to MFT, and my contact Zeiss lenses are all way too loose on the Metabones. That's because the tolerances on older lenses have those problems. It's usually not the adapter. It's usually the lenses. The adapters usually have the adapters are usually undergoing QA to make sure that they fit the measurements that are for those lens mounts. The older lenses, this is one of the problems with old lenses and why I don't recommend them, because the housings are old. They had older QA standards. A lot of it was done by, manual labor, where it's one person's idea of tolerance versus another. And they're also worn down over time. When I had my Canon FD lenses, I had several different 50 millimeter f1.4s, different time periods, right? You had like it was like the FLs, which were different from the FDs. And then even in the FDs, you had the ring that would lock down. And then the other ones were the bayonet mount. And each of them all had different tolerances for how tight or how loose they'd be on the mount. So that's kind of a problem, like with the older lenses, that is not really that much discussed. And it should be, because that can be a problem if you're trying to, change the focus and the lens is loose on there, causes a problem. So I see that a lot less on modern lenses. Tilted cage, that's EF. Yeah, Emotion VFX. If you have an EF mount, get the locking mount. That'll fix your problems. Shot all my feature films with the Sigma 24 to 105 f4 art. Best zoom for a price. Dude, Pascal, are your new shots on the 24 to 105? Because that looks, dude, it looks really good. If you're using the 24 to 105 f4 art, I might actually end up buying that lens, because damn, it looks really good. I guess this is best to convert vintage lenses to EF. Might be. You'll be paying a lot of money for it. You might as well, Chris, if you're going to do that, just buy the ZE or the ZF mount Zeiss lens. the contact Zeiss lenses, the difference between the Contax ones and the ZEZF, like the newer ones from Zeiss, are going to be the coatings on the newer ones are going to be better for newer sensors, which helps with lens reflections that aren't supposed to be there. So unless you really like it when you have more ghosting or more like blooming than should be, I strongly recommend, instead of paying for that mount conversion, to get rid of those Contax Zeiss ones and get the ZEZF ones. I think they're better. My opinion. Check trailer for stolen season trailer on Horizon trailer on new channel. It's 24 to 105. Pictures you saw. Fuji 18 to 55 stock lens. Dude, that was with the 18 to 55 Fuji? Even the headshots of the blonde? Because damn, that's a kit lens, the 18 to 55. Looks really good, dude. Yeah, you're rocking that. Congratulations. Pascal knows what he's doing, by the way. But good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, everything with that. Dude, looks good, man. Congrats. Jealous of your skills. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is production value and our expectations versus reality. So have you guys are you're on YouTube. So you're watching how ads are displayed and the kinds of things you're seeing on YouTube, right? So what I've been seeing is a trend toward the opposite of better production value. And I thought that was weird. For example, I thought it was really kind of strange that several ads in a row were for different products. And the products that they were selling, of course, were like all these different things. Okay. And it was like a really cheap unboxing video that you see on YouTube. You know, they have like the box and like, oh, I got this thing from so-and-so, let's unbox it. And I was like, this is like a YouTube unboxing video that's now just a standard ad. And it looks like trash. It looked like somebody was, doing this with their cell phone. And then the audio quality sounded like it was coming just from, the phone picking up their voice. And I'm going, what the F? Like, I remember when I was in school having to learn how to do all of this stuff, like having to learn to do tons of things to make the production value look better, make sure the shot was in focus. You don't want to use autofocus because, the thing is going to breathe like this. You want to make sure that the colors look right. You want to make sure, especially, that the audio quality is clear and all of these things. Okay. And now it seriously looks like there is almost like a purposeful degradation of production value. Take a break 1 second to say thank you, Emotion VFX, for the super chat. Very helpful for the channel. Thank you so much. And you're welcome. Thank you so much for that contribution. So, the thing is, like, I'm like wondering, why is this happening? And it kind of reminded me of when I was talking to some people who were working for the city, and I was going to try to do this video production job with the city. And they said, well, this was like years ago, and when HD cameras were pretty cheap. And they said, well, we're not using HD yet. We're still using like 720i or whatever. And I'm going, why are you using 720i? And they said, because if we used HD, people would think it was too expensive to do the recordings of the stuff that we're doing recordings of. And I said, what? Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you're intentionally degrading the look of it to make people more comfortable with the quality of the product. And I think we might be seeing the same thing with commercials and with content in general, where the higher the production value appears, the more detached it might appear to the viewer. And therefore, maybe they'll be less inclined to buy it. For example, isn't it more like, just think about this, like just 1 second. Thank you, Pascal. No problem, dude. You're welcome. Thank you so much for the contribution. Thank you so much. Really helps us out. Um, so yeah, so I was thinking like, there's this huge rise in the last maybe 5 years. I think it was like maybe 5 to 10 years of YouTubers doing reviews. And those reviews are being used to sell products. It doesn't matter what the market is. It could be in cameras, it could be in technology, it could be in like 100 different things, right? But the fact that, it's lower production value, it's not this really expensive commercial that's doing all these things, and it's having possibly the same or better results as if you were to spend millions of dollars on a commercial project, and I thought that that was really an interesting thing to see, and I'm seeing it more now than ever. If you are looking at how entertainment is done, like you've got your movies, you've got your television shows, you have your streaming shows, but you also have stuff like YouTube and you have Twitch, right? Like, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Let's Plays or with live streams where people just like all they do is play a video game and they comment while they're playing the video game. And there are people making a lot of money at this. The production value is low. The cost of production is incredibly low. The amount of labor involved is usually in less hands, and the income can be pretty huge for the people who are doing it. And I really think that for us, like, we need to start seeing this for how important it is. If we're spending tons of money and time and effort on production value when there's not going to be any return on investment for either people spending the money on that production value, there's not going to be an ROI for them, and that means that there's not going to be an ROI for you. Then we need to start like rethinking what we're doing. Okay, like we need to start rethinking what we're doing. So that I think is a really important thing to keep in mind. It's a TikTok ad invasion. I'm still thinking of that Jean-Claude Van Damme Volvo commercial from 6 years ago, though. I'd have to look at what you're talking about. My wife is in love with Jean-Claude Van Damme, so I'm really curious to see what you're talking about. They don't make that much, just a quick FYI. Yeah, I'm not saying that they make like, millions of dollars. I'm saying that the fact that, you can do this, and there's a lot of people who are consuming that content is what I'm saying. And in the entertainment world, anything that is entertainment, that is, if I'm consumer and I have, say, 3 hours of time per day to consume media for entertainment purposes, and I'm spending, most of that time on watching Let's Plays, I'm watching Let's Plays and not watching movies, that affects the movie industry severely. Like it's competition. Like all of this in entertainment is going to be a competition. In commercials, it's a similar thing. It's all partly this competitive thing that we have. If one group of people is competing for money from a company to do ads, and they're only needing to spend maybe $100 to create an ad that's just as useful, has just as much return on investment as a media group that would charge $100,000 to produce a commercial. Why would you not go with the $100 person over the $100,000 group? Okay, that's what I'm saying. And I think we as like workers in this industry really need to like think about that. It's very, very important. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at this Jean-Claude commercial. It's very, very interesting. Let me see here. Give me a second. I'm gonna try to find this since you guys are talking about it. YouTube. Maybe I have seen it, but I just don't remember it. Jean-Claude Volvo. Oh my God, it's like one of the first things that come up. Jean-Claude Volvo. Okay, Volvo trucks. Let's see here. Okay, he's just sitting and he's meditating. Does he do the splits? Because if he doesn't do the splits, it's not Jean-Claude. Let's see. Let's see if he actually does it. Oh, he's between two trucks. Okay. Let's see here. He's going to do the splits, isn't he? He's going to do it. Okay. Okay. Can we play this at faster speed? Yep, there he goes. Awesome. That's incredible. I was not disappointed. I was not disappointed. Incredible. I could predict those splits coming from like 10 miles away. Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just something that I've noticed. And what I think is really important for us is to also realize that depending on the market that we're aiming for, or the kind of group we're trying to create products for, we have to keep it in mind that this idea of production value, if you're coming from like a narrative standpoint, let's say you're like, I want to do narratives, but you're, in order to make your bread and butter, you're having to, shoot educational content or some other kinds of content. This idea of this super high production value thing might not actually be worth it to do, and might not even be worth it for the person that you're shooting this for. I mean, a standard, like in some markets, a very standard looking video, like that you'd expect to find for any business, is going to look incredible to them. They will think it's the most amazing thing. Some markets like education, if you can do just a little bit, if you have, some talent and some skill in designing data sets, for example, and designing interactive content in a way that looks nice and can actually have good interactivity, even if it doesn't have a bunch of flashy stuff. In fact, a lot of times the flashy stuff can be detrimental to education. But if you're able to do content that just looks nice, doesn't have to look incredible, doesn't have to go and look like $1 billion project, but looks nice, they're going to appreciate that. And you'll be able to spend less labor hours creating something that they will pass first review pass, without you having to spend a bunch of extra time and money on something they won't even care about or appreciate. This is something that, it's the idea of having to, in art, prepare for the idea of someone doing an A/B test, right? Somebody wiping back and forth between a still image on a moving picture, for example, where nobody will ever tell the difference in real life, spending 10 times the effort to make it look like A, when there's no visible difference between A and B. In the long run, nobody will ever tell the difference or appreciate the difference. Then what are we spending all this time and money for, to make the production value seem higher? What is the actual return on investment that we're getting? So, what I'm trying to say here is that the markets, or the people who drive those markets, or the employers or people who are clients, any of these people who are going to be buying your stuff, if they're not caring, maybe it's time for us to start going, okay, what is it that I can really get away with, so I'm not breaking my back to make this thing look incredible just to earn a living? So I just think that's important to think about. I know it's like counterintuitive for a lot of people, but it might be worth thinking about. In education, for example, I want to give an example so I'm not just saying to, not give people their money's worth. In education, for example, very high energy editing, very loud, high energy music, animations that are really over the top. These are all detrimental to education in reality. People don't learn as much when you do that. For example, I just spent like 2 hours having to cut a lecture that talked about data analytics and presenting the data in a way that people understand. And in every way, the way to make data more simple to understand and for everyone to get it is to simplify the hell out of it. You don't add a bunch of 3D effects. You don't add a bunch of colors that don't do anything. You don't make it look flashy. You don't make it look, in the words of the subject matter expert, you don't bling out your data because it doesn't actually do anything. It actually starts to take away from the message you're trying to say. So we can even use that as content creators to explain to people when they're asking for things to just look higher end for no reason, how that can actually be detrimental. And that can help us out, I think, in the long run. So, yeah, DJ is talking about, pixel effing. That's what we used to call it when we were working in visual effects, because they would like legitimately like go like look at it like that close with their eyeball on the screen and then try to find the things that were wrong, as if anyone would ever do that in real life. And the actual labor hours that it takes to fix that thing that they saw, and the only way they saw it was by wiping back and forth between two things really quickly and staring at a pixel from like 2 inches away from the screen. Nobody's ever going to do that. So, important stuff to think about, in my opinion. Yeah, industry term for sure. Yeah, so think about that. Next thing I want to talk about, this entrepreneur and worker mentality. So the reason why I bring this stuff up again, because like I work on editing, and I work on producing, and I work on a bunch of different things that I do all day. And I like to listen to what other people are talking about on YouTube and all these places where people are actually getting their information, so I can understand where they're coming from. And I really kind of got annoyed when I was listening to somebody talk about, they're an entrepreneur and they're teaching other people to be entrepreneurs. And this is what I usually hear, and you have to, forgive me if it's my bias speaking, but when I hear this kind of stuff, it really sounds like workers being raked through the mud for no reason. There are no entrepreneurs and there are no business owners without workers. Labor is required. And, it's like a worker all the time is going to be working. An owner some of the time is working. Okay. So, this idea of, first of all, trying to say that if you're a worker, you're kind of like, you're like a sucker. I don't agree with that at all. And it really pisses me off. Without workers, entrepreneurs can't do anything. Okay. So, on that, some people, such as myself, okay, I have a regular job that I work. It's not a 9-to-5 job, not in the traditional sense, because, I can actually come to work when I want to, within reason, and I can leave work when I want to within reason. I don't have to be an entrepreneur in order to do that. I just have to work in a particular industry or in a particular job where it allows me to do those things. Okay. If you're an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. You can't just like, if you decide, well, I have that meeting with that client that I'm supposed to go to at 1 o'clock in order to make my bread for the next month. But, I'm just going to sleep in all day and I'm just going to say, screw you. I'm not going to talk to you. Guess what? You can't do that. Okay. So you have to work hours just like everybody else does, as long as you're actually having to do work. If you don't do work, then you don't have to do anything, do you? If you just own things, you don't work for a living, then that's a different story. Okay. But usually entrepreneurs, most of them have to actually work at the businesses that they're in some capacity. It's often being a head. You have to have meetings with people. Maybe you're doing the press stuff. There's a number of things that you do as like a founder or as a CEO or a COO or whatever it is that you're doing for the business that you founded or are the entrepreneur of. Okay. So it should be no surprise that a lot of people are workers and then they have their side jobs. The reason why a lot of us do that is because our normal work is something that we have to do in order to make money, in order to make an income. Then a lot of times there's a side business, not out of necessity, but it could be out of choice. My choice to have a side business, which eventually I guess has taken, the YouTube, this YouTube thing is part of it now. Like I do this because I want to, I do this kind of stuff because I want to. I can create content that I want to create. Okay. If I do video production on the side as my side business, it means that I can do the projects that I decide I want to do. If I don't want to do a project, I don't have to do it. Okay. I have just as much control over that as I actually have more control as owning this business on the side, which is some supplemental income or whatever. And it's a way that I can have my creative outlet and get paid for it. If you own a business, if you own a video production business and it's your sole source of income to be doing that, you're not really going to be able to choose stuff like that. It doesn't work that way. You're going to end up having to do what earns you the money in order to stay in business. You have to. It's not a choice. You have to. If you want to turn away money, you can do that, but it's silly, right? Especially when you don't know when work can dry up. It can be very hard to predict those things. So, what I'm trying to say is that there's no reason why, if you have a side business or if you have decided to have a small project that you do on the side for any number of reasons, to have to grow that into a full-time business. And you shouldn't feel, you should not at all feel like you are a failure or that you're doing it wrong by having that side job or having that side business, because it might be there for a number of reasons. There's no, there's nothing that's going to force you to make that into a full-time business, and you shouldn't feel that way. Okay. If you feel like someone's pushing you to do that, they probably don't know you. Okay. And it's one of those very irritating things that I see often by people who, have a very moderate level of success in a business, and they assume everyone's going to want to do that, or they all have the exact same goal. For my side business stuff, I go like, how can I help out, in this community and then also get paid to do that? That's how my side business stuff works, or is there a fun project that I can do on the side to earn a little bit more income for, a vacation or whatever the hell I want to do, but I actually have some choice on that. If I go, hey, it's supplemental income, I don't really need that, I don't really need to do that, then it's fine. One of the things that I really am glad I don't have to do full time is photography, and event photography, especially wedding photography. That would be the most irritating job I can imagine. But if I was a photographer, guess what? I would probably have to get into that kind of thing, because wedding photography still requires people to do it. Whereas a lot of the photography industry has dried up on work for a lot of reasons. Part of it is that a lot of people don't really need, family portrait photographers anymore. Not as many as they used to. In the 90s and all that, you had even little portrait, studios that'd be in the mall and all that. Those are gone. Those are all gone, pretty much, at least where I am and where I grew up. And even people are owning their own private photography studios. They end up having to do a number of other things that are not those things. They have to evolve with it. And a lot of times it's stuff they don't even want to do. If you ask a photographer, do you love doing corporate headshots? Really? How many of them find that as a creative outlet? How many of them do that because they have to? Okay. So, I don't care if you work as an accountant and you do video production on the side because it's fun. Okay. That's up to you. You can do that if you want. I have no problem with that. Okay. I don't care if you work in video production and you do other projects on the side with your smaller business. If it's like little narratives that you control, or if it's whatever, even in narrative production, a lot of times people have to work on productions that they don't really want to be a part of. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Well, this voice actor is, he's kind of famous, but he took this role as playing a really, really horrific bad guy in a video game or in an audiobook or something else, and didn't really want to be credited because he didn't want to be known for that. I mean, what kind of an existence would that be, where you didn't even want to be known for the work that you do with your voice or with your art? That would suck. That would really suck. So, don't ever feel like you have to grow into a full-time business. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And don't feel shamed into doing it. Unbelievable that maybe it's the way that I was interpreting it, but that's how I understood it. And I didn't like that. And if you work, if you do, sometimes it's also this, like I was also thinking this, right? I was thinking, what if you're somebody who's like a social worker and that's your day job and you love that day job, because you really have a positive effect on people's lives. And that makes you fulfilled as being a human being. And then for your creative outlet, you do photography, or you do videography, or you do narrative filmmaking, or you do whatever it is that you want to do on your other free time, and you develop that into a smaller business. Why would you ever want to get rid of that incredibly important thing that you do for society to try to just go and make money for video production? I mean, if you feel fulfilled as a human being, being a social worker, you should continue doing that and never feel guilted into feel guilted into believing that you're, failing at life because you're not making more money in something else. So I guess it's a matter of priorities, but, my priority has always been to be happy. Some people are happy and, don't need to be a millionaire or a billionaire. So, just think about that. I think a lot of people kind of make assumptions about others, and automatically think you're failing if you're not doing it the way they would do it. So, don't let people make you feel that way is what I'm trying to say. So where's my notes? Yeah. So, and that brings us to this, which is the art field and the race to the bottom mentality. Okay. So, how many of you guys just, know what a race to the bottom basically is? Okay. Just type it in the chat if you think you know what it is. Okay. But it's important, especially in art, to understand that when it comes to businesses and it comes to work, there's an article that I read years ago, and it was basically talking about how your employer hates your guts. And the reason they hate your guts is because labor is the one thing that they've been trying to get out of whatever their business is for the longest period of time, and they just can't do it. They've got to pay you money. They've got to pay for your labor. There's all this stuff that they've got to pay for in order to do it. And it's kind of a hassle doing the hiring and firing process and all these things. Wouldn't it just be easier if everybody was an automaton? And, I'm not going to say every employer is like that. I don't think every employer really thinks that way. However, the important thing to realize is that in just about every field, there are people working tirelessly to try to replace labor. They're always trying to make things cheaper. They're trying to make the skills to acquire in order to do certain work easier to achieve, and it depends on the field, and I'll get into that in a minute. And it takes it takes like a village of people to try to figure out how to displace workers. Okay, so just to give you an example of this. Automatically driven vehicles. Okay. So truck drivers make a living. It's a very difficult job to be a truck driver. Even though people will try to shame that kind of job, being a truck driver is very difficult. You have to deal with every day going out on the road and having to drive in pretty horrible conditions sometimes, especially if you've ever seen the ice truckers thing. Dude, holy crap, right? The Ice Truckers documentary is, dude, see that series, okay? There are some truckers who have to go up and down mountains, and that can be very, very dangerous. And it's very lonely. So the kinds of compensation that they deserve should be relevant to the kind of mental strain, the kind of physical strain, especially the idea that you're sitting in a spot which humans are not designed to do, sitting in one spot, driving a truck under stress, for many, many hours a day. And a lot of them end up having to work tons of hours in order to make enough money. And then when they go home, then they have to have some time to spend with their family. Okay. Automatically driven cars, automatic trucks, those kinds of things, they are designed to get rid of that kind of job. They're designed to get rid of truck drivers. They're designed to get rid of, bus drivers. They're designed to get rid of cab drivers. Anybody who drives a vehicle for a living, if automated vehicles becomes a thing, they're going to be replaced. Okay. And just like automated stuff, the same thing happens with labor in any field that's been outsourced. Here's my story. I used to work for visual effects, and it was in San Diego, and I loved that job. Loved it. Loved the job. I loved the people I worked with. I love the stuff that we made. And then we expanded to Canada. Expanded. And when we were talked to about this, I went into the human resources office and I said, okay, so let me make sure I understand this. You guys want us to go up to Canada to train another set of workforce to do the same jobs we do when there is a ebb and flow of work every year, where in certain parts of the year there's work, other parts of the year there's none. And during that time, there used to be full-time workers, and that full-time worker staff was smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And what they did was replace all those workers with contract laborers, and they'd keep the prices for those jobs as low as possible every time. So you wouldn't get a raise to go up with inflation or with cost of living or any of that stuff. It would just be the same rate. Okay. Then they expand to Canada and they want us to go train them how to do our job. Okay. So I said, this isn't an expansion, it's a replacement. And he said, it's very interesting that you think that way. I think you should prepare for that. That's what they told me. So that happened. Some people, went up there, they trained the workforce, they thought they were doing the right thing. And then the San Diego facilities all got taken down because, oh man, what are you going to do? Work dried up. Oh man, what are you going to do? And then the work goes somewhere else where it's cheaper, right? So then the same thing happened in Canada that happened to us in San Diego. The people that were working in Canada were being asked to train people or to help train people that were in other countries to do the same job as an expansion. And then they were replaced. Okay. So here's what I'm trying to say about this. The race to the bottom is how industries or markets or businesses, they will work almost in tandem to race to find out how low they can go with their price structure, how cheap the product can be. And when they do that, they get to the very bottom where nobody's making any money. And the workers especially are the ones who lose out the most, because you end up with the people who are in the most desperate situation, working in the worst conditions, who end up doing the work. And that's where you end up. Pretty much every single time. It's pretty much every time it works that way. Happened in the VFX industry. There's a few businesses that don't do that, and they're able to be successful. They're okay. They're doing fine. Some of them. A lot of them have not made it. They're gone. They're shuttered. Most of the work is being done elsewhere. Okay? So the reason why I say that is because I feel like there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that happens this way with businesses, okay, and with markets. And the workers, again, are the ones who end up with, they're the ones holding, the short stick going, what the F happened? I thought I did everything right. Like, this business was successful. We worked really hard. The business was successful. A lot of the stuff that I did, the work that I did personally, was used to increase the our throughput. But, we weren't worth keeping. The workers who actually did that were not worth keeping. I was asked to keep with a company, but I said, I can't continue this. I was asked to move to LA. I was not going to be paid enough to move to LA to do that, but it just wasn't, it wasn't going to be worth it to me. And I said, I don't want to be part of this anymore, and, there are some workers in like the Hollywood industry. They have unions that are helping to protect them from this kind of thing happening. Visual effects workers don't, like visual effects workers. We don't, we didn't have any unions like that. And I'm not saying unions are always the answer. But what I'm saying is that there needs to be a little bit more, understanding and solidarity as workers to understand what's happening to us. Okay. And it's not that much different in stuff like the photography community or video production. And the reason I say that is because you have certain individuals who are saying, they're saying, I love video production. I love the world of making stories for people. But what they're doing is saying, why don't you outsource your editing through Fiverr? Why don't you outsource the work to people who are in usually a more desperate situation, and you seriously hurt the local economies by doing that. You hurt every time you send a job that ought to be done by someone in your community, because your community is making the products, your community is thriving together. When you send it elsewhere, it does hurt. It does hurt us. Okay. It hurts creators. It hurts our industry. Okay. So, it makes a lot of sense to some people if they're thinking in really, short-term kind of thinking, that if I can make a quick buck now, I'm winning. If within 5 years I can make 6 figures, I'm winning. When in the long term, what you're doing is you're kind of ruining the whole economy of the way that market works. The same thing can be said about something like Unsplash. Unsplash, I don't know if it's still around, but there was a big thing about Unsplash where it was basically free high-end photography being done, just given away by people with human beings in the shots, which can be very expensive to produce. And commercial photographers were raising a stink about it. Why? Because their livelihoods were being taken away. A spot that would have taken, would have paid a photographer $1,000 or more to be on the cover of a magazine that reaches over 1 million subscribers or whatever. Now that spot, the value of the labor is zero. The value of the labor for a cover of a magazine becomes zero overnight. Okay. And the people who end up usually creating things like Fiverr, things like Unsplash, stuff like that are not really photographers. They're not videographers. They're not people who are working and doing this work. Because why would you value that labor at zero? That would mean that your art means nothing as far as like what you would pay for it. The labor value is zero to these people. It's worth nothing. And it ruins that whole economy in those fields. And when you say to someone, why don't you go read a book called Who Moved My Cheese, that's written by a doctor, a physician, if I remember correctly, and say, just embrace change. It's a changing world. You have to understand that physicians aren't being replaced. Okay? People who are computer programmers aren't being replaced. People who are creating websites to sell people's work for $0 aren't being replaced. Those other people are being replaced. Okay? And what happens is that there is zero community effort to make sure that the people who are being replaced in that way, which they had no control over, are being aptly taken care of. And I'll go back to what I was talking about with truck drivers. When truck drivers are working 40 hours a week or more, cab drivers, have you ever talked to a cab driver? Do you know how much they work in order to just live in an apartment and share with 2 other people? A 1-room, 1-bedroom apartment and 2 other people, they work more hours than I do. At what point of the day are they supposed to train themselves to learn how to be an electrician or learn how to go be a plumber or learn how to go do a number of other things? So we need to be more cognizant, especially the people saying, oh, just deal with change and embrace it and love it. Okay. We need to be more cognizant of the idea that the people saying that are usually not the ones who are affected by these changes. And we as workers that have to deal with that every day, the threat of being replaced, it doesn't matter if it's through outsourcing, doesn't matter if it's through robotics, doesn't matter if it's through an algorithm that completely removes your job from existence, which is a likely thing to happen for a lot of visual effects artists. We need to have a little bit more understanding of that, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. We need to understand that, stop telling each other that it's our personal individual problem. It's not. It's a community problem. In fact, it's a global problem. And we need to come to terms with that. Okay. And in my opinion, we need to understand that a lot of times the people saying, and I think I just said this, but just to reiterate, a lot of times the people saying to just deal with it, just go find another job, are not the people being affected by it. Okay. And it's a lot easier for them to say it because they don't have to think about it. An MD, a physician, is not going to be replaced by a robot anytime soon. A truck driver or a cab driver who does not have enough time in the day to even think about the future, often, certain people don't even have enough time for that. They're just trying to survive, are not thinking, oh, what happens if automation happens? I better go learn how to be an MD with the last 20 years of labor work that I can actually give left. Okay. And just to give you an idea of what kind of things are being affected in the art field, just off the top of my head, visual effects especially, okay? Every single program that does visual effects is trying to figure out how to decrease labor costs. Every single one. That's why tracking is better. That's why there's the cloud tracking is so much better and helps out a lot. Why automatic clean plate generation is a thing. Why people are trying to make sure that they can do tracks around heads in Photoshop and stuff like that. Why are they trying to make sure that you can easily get a clean image so you don't have to pay for the labor of it? Okay. All of this is down to labor cost. It's not just to make it easier for Tom, Dick, or Harry, or Susan, or whoever to make their little family photo look nicer. It's to decrease labor costs. Okay. What was the other thing? So that's in visual effects. Another thing is editing. Editing with stuff like Fiverr, okay? You can get, there's another one too now, where it's you can get a ton of work done, a ton of labor, which is editing done for pennies on the dollar compared to where it would be anywhere else. That's an unbelievable price, okay? There's some others, I'm not gonna name them because there's particular websites that I haven't done all of the figures to know, where musicians get paid almost nothing for the music that they produce or the sound effects that they produce. It's just exposure, as if exposure is going to pay for your rent or for your mortgage or whatever. Okay. So, all of this is important. Just a continuation. We had talked about this before, is a much earlier live stream, but this is all kind of a continuation of some things that had already been done to artists in the past and is happening right now, where there are artists who work on a contract basis. Doesn't matter if it's through Fiverr or whatever. The more powerful the business is, the more of a stranglehold they have on paying artists. And there are situations where those companies that are supposed to pay for art just don't pay. They just don't pay. They'll say, oh yeah, we'll pay you $1,000, $2,000, whatever for a set of artwork. You deliver the artwork, you never get paid. Or they renegotiate the contract for less because the game or whatever just didn't sell as well as they thought. So you got to get lucky that you're even getting any money. And when a lawyer is asked, well, do you think that this is really legal for us to deprive these workers the wages and we're breaching our contracts? And the lawyer responds, what are they going to do? Sue us? Okay. So these are the kinds of people who are okay with taking, the work that you do and decreasing the value of it, because they just don't see it. It's not always a case of them not caring. They just don't know how important it is for you to live and to have a decent living. Okay. So I talked about that a lot because it's very important. So when someone brings up the who moved my cheese thing, ask, why was it moved in the first place? What was the point in doing it? how does this technology or whatever it is that is making it harder for me to earn a living, how is it supposed to affect me? Does it actually make it cheaper for the consumer? Often not. Often it does not. Does it make it where the workers earn more money? No. So who gets it? Who gets to get the advantages of this next level of technology? Going back to the trucks, right? Truck driving and all that stuff. Do you think that, let's not do trucks. Let's do a different one. Let's do automation or a program. Okay. Imagine you work for a company and there's a, widget that you create. All right. And they say, hey, everyone, we've got this new program. It's going to increase productivity for everybody by 10%. Okay. It's going to increase productivity by 10%. Now, what do you think usually happens when that occurs? What happens when a thing helps productivity? Usually what happens is it is followed by a layoff. They try to squeeze as much labor as possible out of less people, and that extra money that used to go to those workers now goes to the people at the top. That is usually how technology is used for people. Have you ever heard of a company who released a new thing with productivity, like increased productivity by, say, 10%, and said, all right, so everybody, because this increased productivity by 10%, you all can come to work 10% less hours per year. And that means that you can spend more time with your family and all of those things. I can tell you that in the United States, that doesn't really happen. It doesn't really happen that way. Usually, whenever you see that there's some kind of thing that you're going to get that increases productivity, usually there's layoffs. And the survivors end up having to do more work. That's usually what happens. Okay? So on the innovation front, because I see a thing about innovation in there and technologies, my thing is not resisting technology. Okay. I don't think that there's any point in doing that. What I think needs to happen is we need to stop thinking that when this stuff happens, that it's an individual problem. Okay. It's not an individual problem that somebody who's working 40 to 60 hours a week all of a sudden doesn't have a job. That is a societal problem. And we need to come together as a community and figure out what happens with those people. Okay. If it turns out that a job that was important for society is now gone or it's devalued, we need to find a way to make sure that those people have work, have a job, can do something. And we don't treat them as if they're like these isolated little cases that just have to, they just have to buck up and work it. No, we should be working together to say, okay, if that job's going to be gone in 3 years, we find a way to make sure that they get the education and the training they need to have a career that works for them and lets them earn an income. Because what happens is the kind of things like what happened to Detroit, where the jobs just vanished and the city destroyed. Okay. So I hope this all makes sense. Okay. I'm not trying to make this like a big thing, but it is something that we need to be aware of. And especially in art. Art is continually, every single year, devalued as something that's not important when it is. It's one of the most important things. Without art, we are not even humans, in my opinion. Just like automatons doing things, okay? Art is very, very important. And it encompasses so many things. There's this idea that there's a left and right brain thing, like mathematic, analytical art, that's actually not real. And usually in art, there's a ton of math involved. If you ever need to have that reinforced with you, look up what the golden mean is and how it's used in art. That's math in art. So, there's a lot to say on this. That'll be my conclusion is that, just be aware of it. Be aware that a lot of people are trying to find out how to devalue your labor. And, I don't have the answers. I don't know what to do about it. But I do know that when you have a problem, the first thing to do is to admit that it's a problem. Okay. That's what I'm trying to do here. All right. Now that I did that, let me go through here. Let's see. It's called pixel effing. Yep. It's an actual industry term. Yeah, we use it all the time. Your point about making products seem more affordable, especially with entrepreneurs via bad ads because they sell crappy course. You know who I'm talking about. I just, I understand. Like I'm trying to more understand like the why. For me, it's I don't care what you think. I care how you think. And in some cases, it's like when it comes to art, I get that money is important, but it really bugs me when someone says like basically all they're doing it for is the money, because it does hurt like other people especially when you do things like devalue the work, you devalue the labor, and then when people start following what you do because you're the competition and you're succeeding, then everybody starts to devalue the labor, and then there's no more artists in your neighborhood. It is a problem. It just it needs to be talked about. And it's very difficult for artists to even recognize that it's a problem. Working for yourself often means you work every day, all the time. It depends, because photographic elements, it depends. I mean, do you think that the guy who owns Home Depot works every day? No, it depends. The more people you have working under you and the more money that you can shave off of that labor to pay yourself, the less work you end up having to do at all. So it just depends. A lot of people who are smaller business owners end up working a hell of a lot of hours. Louis Rossman, from Rossman Group, if you're familiar with that channel, he works a lot. That guy works his ass off. Okay, he's a different kind of person when it comes to owning a business, and he works his ass off. There's some other people who do not, and it just depends. It depends on the kind of person they are. But it just, like I said, it just depends. Some people do, some people don't. Race to the bottom, client's nephew will always do it for free. Yeah. Cheap ass reviews. Yep. That is one of them. Also, the person who is sitting in a very closed off room with very bad ventilation in another part of the world that doesn't have certain regulations to protect workers is also willing to do it for nothing because that's all they've got. So it's really difficult. I have been to places where there's actually good working conditions for the kinds of work that was being done for visual effects in outsource groups. And my job was to help with productivity. This is before I figured things out, and the conditions, I wouldn't work in them. I would not work in the conditions that were there. A lot of people wouldn't, but certain parts of the world, one of the scariest places I've ever been is Patna, India. And in Patna, it was very difficult. It was very difficult to be there. And and I talked with a lot of the people who worked there. It was a very difficult situation. And I gained a lot of appreciation for the kinds of things that like the things I'm talking about now. I don't want to see that kind of thing. Outsourced 2006 plot right there. I have to look at that. I don't think I've seen it because I lived it. Jesus, sorry to hear about that, Tony. The same thing happened in Dubai. It's competition between content creators who offer the lowest price. Yeah, and you have to always ask yourself, how is that lowest price occurring? Like I've talked about this before with products. If a product that costs one person, $500, like their price on it's $500, and another person's $100. Well, what is going on with this one that made it $100? And the thing is that if this one that's $100 starts selling and overselling this one, well, then the people doing this one are probably going to start doing what these people are doing. And if these people are employing practices that are illegal or are completely unethical, well, as long as they can get away with it and they need to make money or they want to make a profit, they're going to do it, because it's either, kill or be killed. That's a lot of the mentality that people have in business. And when you think that way, you're unscrupulous and you're rewarded for being unscrupulous. Those are the kinds of people you got to look out for. And they end up driving, they can be the ones that are driving products or driving, labor value or driving a number of things certain ways. So, it's not everything's face value. In fact, most things aren't. And it's not a black and white thing. I mean, it's a gray area thing. There's a lot of gray in here. So it's me. Yeah, I figured that was Mr. Subjective. Cthulhu. It is Cthulhu. Yeah, good stuff. We had a deep one enters. Yeah, DJ, I think you're talking about Cthulhu. We both were offered management opportunities after they fired our peers. Yes, that happened to us. So in my story that I was talking about, the conclusion for me personally was that I was being offered a management position to basically manage stuff that was going to have to do with VFX with outsource groups. And I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, the mental strain of it is very difficult. When you work with hundreds of people, even if they're like, some of them were in Canada and some of them were here. And I got to know a lot of the people at our outsource vendors for the masking and stuff that was being done in India. Where you get to know these people and you see that, you're working in a business that is just trying to get rid of these people. And for artists, especially artists that are not thinking about the future, they just want to do art, man. Like, artists want to be creative and do amazing things. And they're basically not understanding that the people who pay them are trying to actively get rid of them and push them into jobs like sales and marketing and other things that they really don't want to do. And it really kind of grates on you after a while. And I just couldn't do that anymore. Seen a video where they changed input gamma to BMP-CC 4K film and then output gamma to RA log C and then drop the 2383 Kodak LUT on. Stuff isn't all blown out and crushed. Looks amazing. What's your thoughts on that? Yeah, do that. I mean, if you like the look, then do that. It's the film looks. Certain ones work better in RA log C because they're designed for RA log C. So, if you like that, then do that. I don't have any problem with it. Emotion VFX hurting the industry and the earlier gaming topic. I was working with the gaming network, and basically what they did was letting kids do the work in the name of community, like little ants. Yeah. When I was looking for work in San Diego a long time ago as a freelancer, I would always kind of read the work ads section, and it was comedy every time. It would be, especially for graphic artists, they would want you to create and design their business logo and all this stuff for free. That was like, it was a job thing, but it wasn't a job. They wanted you to design the whole look of their business, their firm, for free, as if that labor has no value, when that can be everything. I mean, they spend tons of money every time they redo a logo for like McDonald's, even if it's going from that straight arch to a rounded arch. And why they would do that, they spend a bunch of money on market research and all this stuff to make a logo that works for them and says the message that they're trying to go with. Same thing goes with color schemes and all that stuff. And they're going to pretend fonts too, stuff like fonts, the kind of fonts you use for your business. I mean, all of these things are important. People spend tons of time and money to learn how to do this, and business owners act like there's no value to that. Unbelievable. They know that there's a value to it. They just don't want to pay you for it. And the reason why they get away with it is because there are people who are willing to do it for free who haven't figured it out yet. So, it sucks. You'll have people doing volunteer stuff all day. I mean, imagine if there was no union in Hollywood and they just allowed people to work as production assistants and stuff like that for no money. Guess what happens on those sets? It sucks. PAs that are not part of a union and are just fly by night just to try to do it, they're horrible on set. Horrible. They have no radio skills. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They can't even stand in a position and go like this with their hands to block people from parking in a spot. Can't even do that because they're too busy watching the production and they're not working. Because they're not professionals in the field and they don't know what they're doing. So, it's that kind of stuff that, and there's labor value in that. I'd rather pay somebody $200 a day, $250 back in the day. It's like probably now it's like $300, $400, whatever per day to do a job like that. Just seriously stand in a spot, with your arms out and make sure nobody parks in a spot, because it will ruin your shop. Happened to me. That's why I bring it up. Cab drivers have it hard, especially with this thing called ride sharing. Yeah, ride sharing has really hurt cab drivers. They had to do a lot of things in New York in order to get their cabs. And then, that's the perfect analogy right there, an example of what happens. You have the ride share thing come out, you have Uber and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, people who made their whole living doing that now can't make a living, because individuals who have no idea what the cost is of running a car and doing, basically a cab service, they don't even know how much it costs. And then all of a sudden, after, I don't know, what was it, a year or so, people started to find out that they were not making nearly enough money, not even making nearly enough money to pay minimum wage in the United States for being a cab driver for the kind of stuff that they were doing. They were spending more money on the wear and tear on their car and gas and all those things than the money they were being paid. So what happens? All of a sudden, they started to learn more about what their labor value is, but now it's too late. The genie's out of the bottle, so to speak. Phones can now do 3D tracking, animated heads, arms, scary stuff. Yeah. If you used to do that kind of stuff, like little gimmicky things like that, you need to find a new way to make an income. I'm a semi driver, work 53 hours a week. It's hard to get tests in and shoot other than one. Dude, your job is very difficult. Your job is very, very difficult. I don't think I would have the patience to be a semi-truck driver. You have to have a lot of patience. You need to have a lot of self-discipline, and you need to have a lot of work put in to make sure that you don't mentally have too much strain on you. It seems like a very lonely job, and I would really have a hard time with it. So thank you for doing what you do. I really appreciate your sacrifice that you make to drive your truck. That is not an easy job, not an easy job at all. And, getting in and shooting on the weekend and stuff like that. I mean, I'm hoping that that's going to be your outlet, like your creative outlet, because you're already doing all of that difficult work. 53 hours a week is a lot. That's a lot to do. And then have another job on top of that. Very difficult. So I hope you're taking care of yourself. Cheap ass reviews. In my opinion, you can't stop innovation. People been screwing over other people for centuries. Yes, that's true. The thing is, we don't have to do that if we don't want to. I have heard, I'm not saying you're saying this, but usually when I talk to some people about this, they tell me that it's in human nature to be like that to each other. And I say, well, explain then Doctors Without Borders, explain stuff like, volunteers who go out to serve their community and make sure people are fed. I mean, you have it where we are a community. Nobody works in a vacuum. We all work in a community, and the things that affect one person affect someone else. Just to give an example, right? The only way that a doctor, a PhD, MD, whatever doctor you want to think of, people who have to spend a long time in school, the only way they're able to do what they do is because there's other people feeding them, housing them, fixing their toilets, bagging their groceries, delivering their stuff that they buy through Amazon. I mean, it takes a community of people to serve people, and we all work together, and why would we decide that one group of people, because they have a certain kind of job, should be screwed over because I just want to pay 10 or 15 cents less for it? What if we said this, right? Like, what if we said, well, the reason why I want automated technology for truck drivers, like semi-truck drivers, for example, is so that the Buckman, if he doesn't want to drive trucks for a living, but he has to because it is a societal good that he's doing, like we need truck drivers, we say this truck driver job is difficult on the mind, it's difficult on the body, it's lonely, it requires all of these hours, they can't even be near their family. So we're going to work together to try to make sure that those people can have jobs in their communities that aren't that difficult, okay? Or we say, we have a 40-hour work week, that's normal. How about we try to figure out how to make it a 20-hour work week and not decrease the salaries people get? It's a mentality change. And when you talk to people about it that way, they start to think, oh, that sounds like it would be a good thing. Like, why don't we do that? Like, why isn't that the result? Well, it's because whatever the benefits are of that technology usually don't go that way. Like, we need to take more of an, like, we in more in a micro sense in video production, we need to take more responsibility as far as a community to say, if this technology happens, we need to be the driving force on figuring out how it's going to be implemented and who it's going to benefit. Because the people who are going to miss out are the people who aren't paying attention, the people who aren't thinking about it that way, and who aren't demanding that if their labor value is going to be decreased, that we as a community figure out how to deal with that, instead of just assuming that it's going to be on the individual to fix it. Not sure what the 01123581321 thing is. Lyft, Uber, also not profitable. Weird industry. Well, a business does not need to be profitable in order for people to make money. Look up the story of what happened to Toys R Us in the United States. Look at what happened to them. Okay. People making money and profitability and all those things, depending on what it is, if you have people who are pretty nefarious at the controls, they can do whatever they want to make money. Doesn't have to be profitable. I think in the case of Toys R Us, it was basically privateering. They really screwed over that company, the people who owned it. This is the reason I love companies who do their business old school, like Grotto Labs in Boston, a headphones company who still assemble their stuff with manual labor and refuse to modernize. Yeah, I mean, the modernization and all that, I mean, I can totally see it if, like you said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in this new way of putting together our headphones, but we're going to decrease the hours of our work staff by 20%, but they will retain the same salary. I mean, think about that. Does anyone ever talk about it that way? Does anyone say, we are going to make sure that 100% or even 80% or 90% of the benefits of the technology are going to go to the worker? Hardly ever happens that way. So I'd be totally fine if they modernized it, and they had this way of doing things. But what if, just think about this, what if the workers only had to work 5 hours a week, but they still got paid the same amount? Dude, why not? If it's still profitable, you're still making money. Why can't the workers make a lot of money? Why can't they? They were the ones who were working there, who helped your business get to where it is now. Where's their reward? That's all I'm saying. I don't think we have to fight against technology in order to make the point. I think we just need to drive who benefits. The benefits of, farming and the big things that have happened with farming shouldn't be where we have an abundance of food and people starve. That's ridiculous. But we do that. I mean, that's what we do. So maybe we change that. Math and art, Fibonacci series, pattern how branches grow on trees. Yeah, photographic elements. That's all mathematics and art. I was just, seeing some posts just today that still is talking about this idea that there's this division between the logic or math side of the brain and the creative side of the brain. Totally ridiculous thing that is debunked and not true. Okay, there is no division of your brain that makes you either artistically inclined or logically or mathematically inclined. Doesn't exist. How you know that is because of how the brain and the synapses and all this stuff fire off when different things happen, and how often mathematics appears in art. And in fact, mathematicians, the idea also that creativity, it's usually people, put it between creativity and logic, they're two different things. In order to be a mathematician and figure out things, you actually have to be incredibly creative. You have to think about how to organize, numbers and use formulas to figure out how things work, how certain things like for example, you're talking about the pattern of how branches grow on trees. To show that mathematically takes a lot of creativity. If there was no creativity, then there would be no new math. It would just all be what we learned before, which isn't a thing. Every year there's new discoveries in math and science and all this stuff. And to think that no creativity really goes into that, it's very silly. It's all like our brains are like a mass of all these different things. Some people are more creatively inclined than others, but it doesn't mean that it has to only be in math or whatever. If you're not creatively inclined in how to do a painting, you're probably creatively inclined in some other way. It could be singing. It could be in designing phones. It could be in designing. One of the things that's really amazing that people don't think about is the art in designing typography, and how much math and understanding of how the eye works and how technology works to make sure that like a good font doesn't bleed into each other and do all these weird things with how we read it. Like that all takes logic, you know, it takes mathematics and data and all those things to figure that out, even though typography in itself is an art form. So I just don't understand why people think that way. It's very, very much untrue. So let's see here. Last thing I'll go over real quick. Usually this thing goes until like 8:30. I mean 6:30, not 8:30. Until 6:30 Pacific Standard Time. Is real quick, discovering and targeting underserved markets. And the reason I'm going to talk about that, it has everything to do with the things that we were just talking about. So like, you know, knowing that, where's my notes? Knowing that there's this race to the bottom mentality that you've got to deal with, that knowing that there's this idea of entrepreneurs versus workers and all this stuff, and, you know, production value, all of these things are important. And what you need to do is start looking at and targeting. If you want to make money, this is only really if you want to make money in this, you need to look at what markets exist that have a need, and you need to find a way to fill that. So, you know, I have my way of doing it, which is through education. Education right now, you know, for distance learning right now, but even in the future, people are starting to wake up to the fact that not everyone learns the same way. Okay. The old school brick and mortar way of a teacher standing in the middle of the room and lecturing works for a particular, works for a particular learner. And people who are discovering more and more about how people learn are realizing that it takes multiple approaches to be able to get people to understand material. What that means is that we can no longer go with just the lecture way of education, right? So it means we need to, you know, look at videos. We need to look at interactive modules. We need to look at several different ways to present information so that people who learn differently can understand it. Okay. And when I was going to school, we were watching movies that were made 20 years before about things. Okay. And with science, especially with scientific discoveries, with all of this kind of stuff, there's going to be new media that has to be made every single year. So, you know, that's the kind of market that I'm looking at. That's an underserved market that really does need our help. Okay. So there's a ton of other markets that are out there, but, you know, just think for yourself, if you're trying to figure out how you're going to fit in with making money and making products that are going to be useful, what other markets are there that you can actually fit in where you can make money, where the production value is not going to require that you get a $30,000 camera or a $10,000 lens, and how you're going to serve that market. That's the kind of thing that I'm doing right now. So I'm doing it with education, doing it with scientific research, because scientific research especially needs to, in my opinion, change the way that they communicate what they're doing in order to get more funding. So there's a ton of other markets out there to look at, but if you're trying to make money, for example, by jumping into an industry that is kind of overburdened with people trying to make music videos, for example. I mean, if you want to do music videos and you're really good at it and you're making money, don't stop. But if you're just getting in, that market is probably full. If you're in a populated area, there's a ton of people who are going to be doing it, and you're going to have to work very hard to differentiate yourself from the competition. Or you find an area that has no competition, that no one's looking at, that has zero service, and you find out what it is that they need, how they can grow their business, or how they can make more money, how they're going to get an ROI on what you're making, and start targeting those areas, because you need to get ahead of this whole devaluation of labor. Okay. It's already happened in the music video world. I saw it. It's already happened in the world of doing freelancing gigs for doing grip work. I used to do like freelancing grip work and video work and all that. The labor value has been hugely devalued, hugely. So, look at other areas where you can actually fit in and make some more money. Okay. That's only if you're looking at trying to make a living at it. If you want to do it for art purposes, totally different thing. Okay. You can do whatever you want when it comes to art. I don't really care. But, if you want to do travel videos, for example, just for artistic purposes, not for earning a living, that's no problem. Just do it. It doesn't matter. But, making travel videos and expecting to make a living out of it, probably not going to happen. It's very, very unlikely. Have you seen that Disney BTS video where the 3D scene is linked to the camera? It entirely removes the need for 3D tracking software. Not sure. What you're talking about. When you say 3D, I think stereoscopic 3D, because there were ways that they were trying to. When I was working VFX, and stereoscopic 3D was the biggest thing, they were trying to find ways to basically remove all the labor that it takes to make a really good stereoscopic image, which actually even 3D cameras, like if you have the two cameras doing the stereoscopic imaging, there's a lot of artifacts and a lot of problems that end up because there's micro jitters between the two cameras. And then also sometimes the cameras aren't perfectly aligned and it takes way the hell longer. And then you're doubling the amount of money that it takes to shoot on the day. So it really does. It depends on what you mean by 3D. If you're talking about for 3D tracking software and being like how you would put like a green screen situation or background removal and then throw in a new background, then that would be pretty amazing if they have that. And the whole point of that is to remove labor. It's not to make it look better. It's to remove labor. I'm not sure. I'd have to look up what that Lightro cinema camera is, but I kind of got out of some of that stuff a while ago. So yeah, that was what I had for this week. I'll just do like is it weird that I really enjoy rotoscoping and people call me in to do it for them? I would say you're weird for liking it because I hate it. That used to be one of my main jobs. I was actually a quality assurance for a long time for looking at visual effects, rotoscoping and stuff like that. And I did not like doing it. I really, really didn't like it. DJ Tutorials, I was and still am the best stereo eye in the biz. Yeah, he really was. Or is. Yeah, he really kicked ass at it. Yeah. I don't know what to say. It always makes me upset when I think about it. I really did enjoy it. It's like when I worked for the news. I didn't hate working for the news. I loved it. I could have probably worked in the news, even though I don't like the news in general. I could have probably worked that job forever. I loved the people that I worked with, and I loved the work that I did. I had so much fun at that job. Just the pay I could not continue working there because there was no money, and then they were going to get rid of us anyway. They got automated cameras and they were getting rid of everyone and replacing us with lower wage workers. And it was the environment was good with the workers that I was with, but of course, the people who owned the station were not interested in keeping us around. I yeah, I mean, it sucks. I think back, like I could have probably worked both those jobs. So, like the VFX job I had, I could have worked, probably my whole life if that's what I was doing. I loved the people I worked with, loved them, and I loved what I was doing, even though it was in like visual effects and doing very particular things with VFX. Even later on, when the job got really annoying, working more in Nuke and having to unscramble scripts in Nuke and having to do a bunch of things in there and figure out, like, basically then I was trying to figure out how to do things faster. Even that I could have worked that forever, but I just, when you are working in an industry that is just eating you, you have to make a choice. So it sucks. So yeah. Oh yeah. So I'll just tell a quick story. When I was working in the news, it was DJ, me, this guy that we worked with, Charlie. I forget who else. I think back then, like, we ended up with only 3 people working at a full news show. This was like 4 or 5 hours of news with only like 3 people. Okay, not kidding. And we were operating 6 cameras in 1, 2, 3, 4 different studios, and it was really hard. And we were doing that for a while, and DJ and I and Charlie, like, we kept singing the Shock the Monkey song by oh my God, why am I blanking on his name right now? Peter Gabriel, the Peter Gabriel song, and we just kept like singing it. And Renee, she was the weather lady. She's famous for the turkey gobbler thing, if you've ever seen that. If you just look up, channel 6 turkey gobbler weather, or I don't think she was doing the weather thing, but it's the same woman who was doing the weather. She's famous for the turkey gobbler thing, where she like put the turkey gobbler thing in her mouth instead of doing it the way the guy showed. She was like, "Can you guys like stop singing that?" And we looked at each other and we're like, "Nope." And we just kept doing it. Really pissed her off. I can't imagine how annoying we were. Like, and it was just a few of those lines, like, over and over. But that was a difficult job. I mean, you're talking, dude, that was a hard job. And it was like we had to get up at 3, 4 in the morning to make it to the morning shift for the news. It was very hard. But yeah. Look it up. I can here. I'll make famous the turkey gobbler thing again, real quick, so you guys can see. Let me see if it has been taken down yet. Oh no, I'm gonna have a hard time finding it. Let's see here. It made it on like one of those late night shows. Where? Let me see here. Here it is. Hell yeah, here it is. 5.5 million views. I was here. Okay, guys. I was at the recording of this famous video, and I believe DJ was there too. I was recording this. Okay, I was on one of the cameras. It's amazing. I'm gonna watch it now. And boom. Oh God, I was recording that. Please watch that video if you're still here. Please watch that video. I was recording this, and I could not believe that this was happening. And the thing was, like, Mark wasn't even supposed to be there, if I remember correctly. Like, we ended up having to like replace some of the people on the San Diego Living show because some people like were being replaced. But yeah, she didn't like when we were singing "Shock the Monkey." It was funny. She won't let me share that video with her on Facebook anymore. I was sharing that every Thanksgiving. I still put it on my own page. I'll never forget that. Reminiscing about the old days. Yeah, never forget, dude. I will never forget that. There were some other things that she used to do on that show that were so funny, but they did not make it to prime time. All right, folks. Well, thanks for coming to this live stream. I want to give a shout out. I got 3 this time. Zeke, thanks for the super chat. That was very helpful. Thank you so much. Emotion VFX and Pascal, thank you so much for the super chats. Glad I could help you guys out. If you need help with stuff, let me know. I've got my email address in the about page. If you need help with something, let me know. And I will catch you guys later. Doing live streams currently every Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So I will see you later. All right. Bye.